Morning everybody, this is a short video to explain how to write 25-mark essay questions. And you're going to have to do a few of these at the end of year 13 when you do your final exams. In paper 1, you're going to have to do one of these in your data response. In paper 2, you'll also have to do one of these at the end of the data response. And in paper 3, you're going to have to do two 25-mark essay questions. I'm going to give you a brief outline here, and I'll probably do another video which looks at the marking grids and how they do that, but I'll give you the basics here and an overview of everything. The first thing to know is that your 25-mark essay question will say evaluate at the beginning of it. And that is a clue of what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to come to a conclusion with this at the very end, and we'll talk about that briefly in a bit. And because it's 25 marks, I recommend that you take 30 minutes. You need to force yourself in the exam. It's the same with all of the questions. If you have a 5-mark question, you need to give yourself 5 minutes. 10-mark question, 10 minutes. You need to force yourself to stop and move on. When you get to the essay question, it's 25 marks, but allow 30 minutes, because then you've got 5 minutes extra for thinking and planning and everything else, because you really want to do a good job here and make sure that you've got enough time left at the end of the exam. At the very beginning of the essay, you probably want to do a definition which relates to something in the question, just to set the scene and show that you understand the knowledge. And I would recommend the examiners say that they like a diagram, if possible, at the beginning of your essay. And there will nearly always be a diagram that's appropriate. Also, the diagram is really helpful because you can hang your knowledge on that diagram. By describing a diagram and referring back to it and talking about what's happening in the diagram, that allows you to show your knowledge and also to be applying your knowledge. And the way that your marks are going to work is that in the whole of the essay, you have to show your knowledge. So that means that you're picking the right theory, that you're picking the right economic theory, that you're on track with that you have the right diagram, that you understand what you're talking about. If it's a question about price elasticity of demand, you know what the formula is, you can explain what it is. And you've identified that it's about price elasticity of demand. You're not talking about cross elasticity of demand by mistake. As well as the knowledge, you also need to make sure that you're doing application. And application is giving real life examples. And you could talk about just something theoretical, but it's putting something into real terms. That's what application is. And also describing a diagram can also be application. But it's the idea of not just setting down the theory, but also applying it to real life and to what the actual question is that they've asked you about. So if the question is about the impact of trade restrictions on developing countries, you give examples of how it might affect specific developing countries and examples of how it might affect, for instance, day-to-day life or businesses in that country. It's giving more detailed application to real life. And as well as application, you also need to do analysis. And all that word analysis means is that you are giving detail in your writing. You're saying things like because, so, therefore, these kind of words, so that you have chains of reasoning. And you'll see when we look at the marking grid that they are marking you for these chains of reasoning. They want you to be connecting everything up and going into enough detail. So if you're somebody who's a bit brief and doesn't say very much, you won't get as many marks here for the analysis. You need to make sure that you explain yourself really well. And these three are to do with the knowledge, application, analysis. The final section is the evaluation. And evaluation, it sounds more confusing than it really is. All evaluation is looking at the bigger picture. It's taking a step back and it's critiquing what you've written. So you write something and then you think, oh, is that really right? Will that really happen? Will it always happen? Will it happen in that way for all firms? Will it happen in that way for all countries? Will it happen in that way for all individuals? Or how long will this thing take? So will there be a time lag? Or will it affect all parties equally? Also, do you need some extra data? Or is there an alternative explanation for what you've said already? So what you're really doing is you're setting out here the sort of basics to answer the question in the knowledge application and analysis. And then your evaluation, you're coming in and you're sort of saying, well, is that really the case? Will this happen? Imagine that you have presented an answer to a question and then you've got somebody saying to you, but what about this? What about this? That's what you're putting in your evaluation. And the way that you need to structure this so that you make sure that you get all of the marks and that you're getting through all of the question in your 30 minutes is dependent on the question that you're being asked, but there are two main ways of doing this. The most recommended way is to think of your points at the beginning. So you maybe want to brainstorm that. What are going to be the main points that you're going to make? And the way that you'll go through the essay is you'll think of a point, you'll make your point, you'll do your knowledge, your application, your analysis on that point. And then at the end of the paragraph, you do some evaluation about that point. So this was your first point. Then your next point, you make the point, you do your knowledge, your application, your analysis, and then you evaluate that point. And you keep doing this repeatedly. And then at the end, you do your conclusion. Another way that you sometimes can do it is you can do knowledge, application, analysis for a point, then knowledge, application, analysis for a point, and so on. And then you start doing evaluation of these points. However, this one, I'm going to put this in square brackets, I wouldn't recommend that usually quite so much, because what can happen is that you run out of time doing this and you don't get onto the evaluation. Also, you can get yourself in a bit of a tangle because you forget what the evaluation was for this and this, and you're trying to do everything at the same time, and it can be confusing for the person that's reading it. So usually this is a better strategy. The other thing to say, there's no set amount of points I would recommend for doing a question, because it depends on the question that you've been asked. However, because of the way that the marks are done, you need to have about 2/3 of all of your writing needs to be on knowledge, application, and analysis, and about 1/3 is on evaluation. Because the way that it actually works in the exam is that you'll have knowledge, you'll be given 4 marks total, it's possible. Application is 4 marks. Analysis is 8 marks, that's all of your detail. And evaluation is 9 marks. And it works out as 64% and 36%. So about 2/3 here and 1/3 here. So you need to make sure that you're getting this third in. That's quite a lot. And if you evaluate as you go along, you'll find that much easier. So you don't want to forget to be doing your evaluation. And also don't forget to do your definition at the beginning and your diagram. And then the final thing that we really need to emphasize is that you have to have a conclusion at the end. This is really important because, again, on the marking grid, if you don't come to a supported judgment, then you can't get to the top level for your evaluation. So you need to make sure you have a conclusion. This is not repeating everything that you've written already. You don't need to do that. This is just coming to a view. It's saying, overall, I think X in respect of the question. And then you need to give a main reason why you think that. So it's a bit like if someone was advising you about a situation that they're in, something that they should do, you would give them all of the different points, all of the different things that they need to consider. As you're going along, you might say, oh, but this might not apply because of this, or have you thought about this? That's your evaluation. But then at the end, the person's going to say to you, but what should I do? What do you think is the answer to the thing I've asked you? And you need to give them the view at the end. Otherwise, you haven't really answered their question. You haven't really got to the end of the thing. And if you just repeated everything that you'd already said to the person, they'd say, well, you've told me all this already, but what is the view? So you need to give a view at the end, and you need to back this up. So it might be something you say, overall, I think X, particularly because of something else. Or I think X, although it depends on this other thing. But you need to give a final view at the end. So I will do some other videos which go into more detail about the marking grid as well.